Hi, Aaron Skinner here. In this episode of Scale Modeling Basics, we're going to be talking about decanting paint. Now this is something you're going to want to do if there's a color that comes in a spray can that is not available in a bottle, and you want to be able to airbrush it onto your model. Now don't get me wrong, there are times when a spray can is perfectly functional. I use them all the time on airliners, and there are some car guys out there who get terrific finishes straight from the spray can. But then there are some models where a spray can is just not that useful. If you get a lot of nooks and crannies, you want to be able to make sure you get good coverage in there, that's when you're going to want to airbrush. And that's when you're going to want to decant that color. To decant paint, you're going to need a few things. Obviously, the spray can. You're going to need a bottle or some sort of jar to keep the paint in. Ideally, it should have a lid if you want to save the paint for a long period of time. You need something to seal that bottle as you're decanting the paint. An old rubber glove or an old latex glove that you've used for painting previously is perfect for that. A rubber band to secure that in place. Some scissors are useful for cutting that. You're going to need some normal drinking straws. These are great for attaching to the nozzle to move the paint from the spray can into the reservoir, and some tape to secure that. Before we get started, let's talk about safety. This is a messy process. We're talking about moving paint from one container to another. It doesn't always go exactly where you intend it to. It's under pressure, it splatters, so wear an apron, protect your clothes, unless you just like them messy. Gloves to protect your hands so you're not getting it everywhere. And then also the thing you might want to use, and I'm not wearing one today because I want you to be able to talk to you guys, but a respirator or a mask to protect you from fumes and particulates that may be let loose. Okay, so the first step in the process is prepping the bottle that's going to receive the paint. For that we need to cover it. So I'm going to use this old latex glove, cut a piece out of it that's big enough to cover the top and then some. And then I'm just going to place it over the top. And it doesn't need to be super tight. You don't want it to be so tight that it rips when you cut a hole in it. You can also use aluminum foil for this. Anything that you can put across the top that's going to cover the edge. Okay. That should be perfect. The second part of the process is prepping the can to transfer the paint. To do that, we need to attach something to the nozzle. That's where the drinking straw comes in. So this is just a simple plastic drinking straw. The first thing you want to do is cut a little bit of a curve into it so that it will fit better around the nozzle. It doesn't have to be a sharp curve, just enough to form a little bit of a tighter seal around that nozzle. And then you can tape it in place. And then you can cut this straw to the length you need to transfer the paint easily. I usually leave it a little bit long because that way there's more liquefied paint. Now for the moment of truth. This is where it gets messy, so I've got my gloves on. The other thing I've done is made sure that this can of paint is well shaken before we start decanting. You don't want to shake this at all once you've started moving paint through the straw, because there's going to be liquid paint in there and it is going to go everywhere. The process is pretty simple at this point. You insert the straw into the bottle through the opening, and then you depress the button and just let the paint roll in. And you should start to see it dripping off the end of the straw and building up inside the bottle. It will bubble quite a bit. We'll get into what that is here in a minute. But just keep going until you've got as much paint as you think you're going to need for a project, or as much as you need for 2 or 3 projects if that's what you want to do. So I think I have enough paint in my bottle for the projects that I need, but we're not quite done with this process yet. This paint needs to sit for several hours to gas out. There's propellant and some other stuff in here, and if that's in the paint when you go to spray it, it ends up with problems. Normally I would just leave it as it is, but I'm going to take this off so you can see what that process looks like a little bit. As you can see, it's bubbling right now, and that is that gas coming off the paint. That's why you want to leave it in a container with a little opening in it so that gas can escape. If you don't, it will pressurize, and when you go to open it, what you will have is an explosive eruption of paint. Again, very messy and unpleasant. And here's a dramatic example of what happens if you try to use this paint too early. I'm going to put just a little bit of this into my airbrush, and you can see that it bubbles a lot. All of that needs to come out of this paint before you can use it on your model. When I say wait several hours, I mean at least 2 to 3. If you can still see bubbles in the jar that you put the paint into, it hasn't degassed enough. If you go to put it into your airbrush and it bubbles like we showed you, it hasn't degassed enough. You need to let it sit for longer. You just need a little patience, like everything else in modeling. So that's how you go about decanting paint. I'm Aaron Skinner, and we'll see you next time.